You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
We are back. We are back. The Sons of the Shoe is back. Hi, Spencer German. How you doing, buddy?
Muted myself. Pretty good, Nick. How about you?
Doing all right here. Crazy week in college football. The early signing period opens on Wednesday, December 20th. That would be tomorrow as we record here on a Tuesday. It closes on Friday. We are at smack dab in the middle of bowl season. There is a flurry of Buckeye news, none of it seemingly positive to this point. So we got all that going on. We got Chip Kelly fixing college football, but as everybody knows, we are a new podcast. We would appreciate you following the show wherever you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, the free Odyssey app, 923thefan.com. Of course, you can also watch us on the 923thefan YouTube channel. But why would you do that? I am fat. I am ugly. Do not do that to yourself. But I guess we can start at the beginning. With transfer portal news, Julian Fleming officially going to Penn State, Kyle McCord officially going to Syracuse. Those were the two big dominoes that Ohio State fans were waiting to see where guys that dropped into the portal for Ohio State went. Let's start with Julian Fleming. Is this a big blow for Ohio State, him going to a division rival, a conference rival?
First of all, for him, I think it makes a lot of sense. He is from Pennsylvania, and I know he was recruited by Penn State coming out of high school. So I think that move kind of makes sense for him. But yeah, I wonder about does he know trade secrets thing? But I mean, listen,
real quick. Penn State already knows how to lose to Michigan, so they don't. There's no here. You really want to piss your fans off. This is how you do it.
Well, it's more so does he have the secret recipe for James Franklin to finally get one over on Ohio State? Is more so what I think I'm referring to. I don't know if that's the solution. We spent an entire episode after the win over Penn State talking about how James Franklin's always just going to James Franklin. I don't think Julian Fleming necessarily solves that, even if he comes with, hey, this is what they like to do. And he may not even know everything that they are trying to do based on who's starting at quarterback next year for Ohio State either. So that's kind of a big mystery for him as well. But does it stink he kind of goes to a Big Ten rival? Yeah, but here's the thing, Nick. I think we'd both agree, and this is not a knock on Julian Fleming. He seems like he's a good dude. He obviously has been a leader on with this program for the last couple of years. Even when they had Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all those guys, they all raved about how great Julian Fleming was and how just a great teammate and leader that he was for the group. But I don't know that he has lived up to the expectations of him coming out of high school as one of the. Let's face it, he was one of the highest rated recruits to ever come to Ohio State. I'm pulling it up here real quick. He was the 7th highest recruit to ever come to Ohio State. So he had some key drops at certain moments. He just never really sort of materialized when you saw all these other receivers who were kind of around him. So I'm not sitting here shaking in my boots oh no, Julian Fleming's going to Penn State. That means Ohio State's in trouble next year. I'd be more worried if Jeremiah Smith was not committed to Ohio State than I am about Julian Fleming going to Penn State.
Is it bad that I kind of root for the kid? Because all the things you mentioned, by the end, when he'd drop a pass, and I can't remember if it was a Penn State game or the Rutgers, there was one of those games towards the end of the season where it was kind of a moment for him, and he had kind of a drop. And I just, at the end, one of the downsides of college football fandom is that we are hyper-focused on guys we have sky-high expectations for. And Julian Fleming was one of those dudes, and I just felt bad for him by the end of it because he just seemed like a good kid that just got lost in the shuffle, which is what happens. It's funny, they had Emeka Ibuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not Julian Fleming's fault, per se, that he got lost. And before that, it was Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it was all these other dudes. So, I'm hopeful that he gets a new start and a fresh start. And listen, I don't think he's going to be the difference maker in next year's Penn State, Ohio State game. And obviously we've got that going on. We've got Kyle McCord, who apparently at the last second said hell no to Matt Rule and Nebraska, which seemed like I mentioned to you the stylistic fit that I had concerns about with how Matt Rule likes to play offense and what Kyle McCord's good at. Well, then it turns out Dylan Raiola, who is the nephew of Donovan Raiola, longtime Lions starting center, that he flipped from Georgia back to Nebraska. So now they've got their quarterback, and then Kyle McCord lands in Syracuse. And I got to be honest with you, don't love it for Kyle McCord. New head coach, defensive head coach, first-time head coach at any level, and he's from the defensive side of the ball. I know that Fran Brown has gotten a lot of love for the staff that he's kind of put in there, but you don't have any track record on the offensive side of the ball that you can kind of point to. And so to me, it's a Hail Mary. And it feels like, well, this is the best I could get, which surprises the hell out of me that that's the best Kyle McCord could get, Spencer.
First of all, I was just going to say, I don't think there's an issue with rooting for Julian Fleming. I agree with you. I think he just kind of got lost in the shuffle here. There was so much wide receiver talent coming in. It's not fully his fault. There were some moments. He actually had a couple good catches in that Michigan game too that I thought were like big time for him. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it didn't really materialize to the level we thought it would for him. But I certainly am right there with you in watching him next year against Penn State and seeing any Penn State games. Like I'll be certainly supporting him. But yeah, with the Kyle McCord thing, it is interesting that Syracuse ends up being sort of the best option for him. We talked about like, oh, maybe Pitt would be an option, and there'd be some other schools. Syracuse seems like it's a little lower on the totem pole for schools that he would end up at. And yeah, you bring up the new head coach there being a defensive minded guy. I don't know if they're bringing him in hoping, okay, he'll sort of stabilize the offense for us while I focus on rebuilding the defense here. But I don't know if I think he can still be okay. And I think he can still, if his goal is I'm going to go here and get some NIL money, maybe increase my draft stock or whatever. I'm not going to sit here and say Syracuse increases your profile, because I think Ohio State, being the starting quarterback at Ohio State, is obviously a bigger deal than being the starting quarterback at Syracuse. But do you think this has the potential to backfire on Kyle McCord? Or because I think there's certain programs he could have gone to where it really would have worked out. Like he would have had the right system, had the right coach, could have done some nice things, almost ended up like maybe a Kenny Pickett type player where you're like, oh, this guy coming out of college, he's got some potential. Let's see what we can do with him. And then even if he doesn't pan out the NFL, maybe he goes in a round that you wouldn't have necessarily expected and he makes something out of it. But do you think that him going to Syracuse now is going to maybe hurt the potential of him to increase his profile in that way?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I hope it works out for the kid because, again, I got nothing against him. All right, he wasn't what they needed this year, but I guess I don't like how the process played out. And when you're choosing between Nebraska and Syracuse, and all due respect to both those schools, Matt Rule's a really good man. He really is, a really good college football coach, and he seems to embrace the NIL era, which is awesome. That's adaptation, and I think Fran Brown has gotten a lot of great marks for being the hire there at Syracuse. I guess my thing is, tell me why it's better than Ohio State. And it's funny, when we first saw the news, our reaction was, well, maybe Ryan Day went to him, whispered in his ear and said, you're not going to be here next year, so why don't you go out in the portal and make some money? As this thing has evolved, it sure seems like Ohio State was surprised. And actually, Bill Kurlick, who was on our last episode, mentioned that Ohio State was surprised that Kyle McCord went into the portal.
Yeah.
And so, there are also whispers about a family member being in his ear and maybe saying, hey, my family member needs to be the starting quarterback next year, guaranteed.
Right. So real quick, I just want to add some of the things that I've just heard. And again, I'm not trying to pretend, I'm not trying to pose as a Ohio State reporter. I'm not in the building every day to know, but just things that I've heard from people I've talked to. It sounds like, it was more so we kind of talked about it, Nick. It sounds like it was kind of I'm going to break up with you before you break up with me type thing. He kind of got wind that Ohio State might be looking elsewhere. He said, if you can guarantee me the starting job and you can maybe get me some more NIL money, I'd be willing to stay. And Ohio State was kind of we're not, we're going to explore our options. And then that's where he leaves. So I can understand why maybe it caught him off guard, but I also think like they had to expect it on some level that it could happen because Kyle McCord listen, the stats are the stats. That's going to help boost his case for why he deserves more NIL money. So I'm sure on some level, like he looked and said, I can go somewhere else and get paid based off of what I did at Ohio State. And if that's what's a priority to him, then fine. I think like
actually no, that not fine because you're going to get paid a pittance. Like the difference between what he could get paid at Ohio State and what he probably got paid at Syracuse. So it's all speculation at this point. It's none of it's firm and on top of the radar. So like, but one, you can't tell me that Syracuse is going to pay you more than Ohio State would. And two, the whole point of him going in the portal is I want to go to a place where I know I'm going to start so I can become an NFL quarterback. When was the last time Donovan McNabb, 23 years ago, was the last legitimate starting quarterback?
Well,
Tommy DeVito.
I was going to say, don't be sleeping on Tommy DeVito over here.
You talking to me? You talking to me? Sorry, I went full De Niro.
He might have somebody listening to the podcast, and
he
might come whack us if we don't show some respect. So
I do not want to get whacked. No, sir. I'm not in high school. I got to tell you though, man, like it bugs me. It bugs me because if your idea is, well, I can get $200,000 more NIL here. Okay, well, where's a better program that's going to put you in the NFL? Yeah. And I got to be honest with you. Coaches annoy me when they say, man, kids don't want to compete anymore. It sure seems like either Kyle McCord didn't want to compete or somebody in his family or people around him didn't think he should compete. And I think next year, like if Kyle McCord comes back, I don't think they're starting Aaron Nolan in his freshman year. So even if Ayer's in the competition, I don't think he's a serious, competitor. And so you already beat Devin Brown out once. Like Lincoln Keenholz shouldn't scare you that much. Like I think this is a real miscalculation for Kyle, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope he goes to Syracuse and secures the bag, and then next year he's a first, second round pick in the NFL. I don't think it's going to happen though. Not the way it could happen at Ohio State, where you're playing around other top 10 picks at almost every spot of the ball. And you're going to have, potentially Smith next year, as long as he signs this week. You're going to have Carnell Tate. You're going to have all these guys that can help you get where you want to go. So if he had landed in Oregon, where Dante Moore landed, if he had landed at USC, where Malachi Nelson just hit the transfer portal, or if he had gone to Oklahoma, these are all places that even though they don't have a track record like Ohio State does with putting Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins, CJ Stroud, all first-round picks into the NFL under Ryan Day, but at least they're premier programs that have premier talent around you that make you better. Instead, you're not going to Syracuse where it's year one of a rebuild, and you got to be the best player on that team. Good luck, man. I feel bad for the kid. I think this was either an ego of his move, or
would you feel this way if you went to Nebraska? Like if he ended up in Nebraska, would you feel better about it?
Not really. Marcus Satterfield has not. I mean, Marcus Satterfield's the OC there.
Yeah.
Talk to a South Carolina fan how they felt about Marcus Satterfield. And again, I thought stylistically the fit just didn't make sense. So
yeah,
I just feel bad for the kid. I feel like he got caught up in the game. And it's on him. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, in the end, it's on, if you really want to be an NFL quarterback, how is Syracuse better for that than Ohio State?
Yeah, and again, I don't know what his priorities are. I bring up the money thing. We don't know the full details of any NIL deals. There was the one that was reported with Nebraska when he was rumored to be reporting there. That was like 600,000 or whatever the hell it was, to be the spokesperson for Honda McCord. But yeah, like, I don't know, like maybe he is driven by the money and he's like, maybe I'm not going to be as good of an NFL prospect, so I got to get my money now. Like, I don't know what's driving him, but I will say this, because you bring up guys not wanting to compete. I think it's even less about him not necessarily wanting to compete, because he stepped into a competition this year and he won it. It might just be flat out, Nick, like he just wants to be wanted. Because you hear about like the modern day athlete, and I don't mean this as a knock to the modern day athlete. I think it's more about coaches need to evolve the way that they think. Like we talk about Dabo Swinney being very archaic in the way he approaches things. Like, oh, I don't want the transfer portal. I'm not gonna baby a guy. I don't want these guys getting paid. All this different stuff. I think it's more about like the modern day athlete is the modern day athlete. You have to adjust to them. They're not going to adjust or bend to you. And so I just wonder, like, in all that talk about those things and how athletes respond to certain things today, I just almost wonder if the mindset for some of these guys, maybe this is Kyle McCord, is, hey, I want to be where I'm wanted. And if I'm not wanted at Ohio State after I put up the numbers that I put up and I did what I did and I came within a couple plays from potentially knocking off Michigan, then I don't want to be here. And the money would obviously help. And so I'm going to go somewhere where I feel like I'm wanted. I do wonder how much that maybe plays into it as well.
So with that, the other quarterback carousel, or the rest of the quarterback carousel, continues to spin. Dante Moore lands at Oregon, as I mentioned. Dylan Gabriel also ending up out west as well, transferring out of Oklahoma. Malachi Nelson of USC is back in the portal. So it's interesting that the Buckeyes still do not have, at least seemingly, a path to a quarterback here, as there's a lot of guys who've been in the portal for a hot minute that they have either showed little interest or just have not pulled the trigger on, including Cam Ward. I think they're in a really interesting situation, and I think fans are going to start to get really uncomfortable as more of these guys go off the board, as it starts to look like they're just going to commit to the plan that they have.
Yeah, and I think the one thing working in their favor maybe is that this is kind of there's a closed period right now that started on Monday. So from the 18th of December till the 11th of January, basically through the national championship game, the visits for recruits and different things, you're not allowed to do campus visits, official visits, or off-campus contact. There's only really phone calls kind of going on. So I actually feel like Ohio State, my view on it is this: they're going into this bowl game, the Cotton Bowl with Missouri, as a chance to basically audition both Devin Brown and Keenholz and see kind of what they have here. And then once that window kind of opens back up in the new year, they'll have a chance to maybe host some of these guys. Because I don't know that, like, Malachi, what the hell? I don't know that Malachi Nelson, is going to make a decision here like instantly. Like, I'm sure he's going to kind of see what's out there. And I would guess, like, I don't know that Ohio State's interested in him, but if that's somebody they might pursue, maybe that's something they do after they kind of see how the bowl game goes, which is coming up here. It's only like 10 days away. So I don't know that they're necessarily in. I don't know that. My point is, I don't know that there needs to be panic yet, but I do think, yes, it's going to make Buckeye fans a little unnerving to know they don't have that guy just yet picked out. Now, I have a question in relation to Dante Moore, because you said you mentioned he made his decision this week. I wonder, like, how much do you think the Buckeyes are looking at the options out there? And this could be in play, too, for a guy when you're looking at Malachi Nelson, because he's a younger guy. You're expecting he's probably going to start a couple years for you. How much do you think that is holding back the Buckeyes from pursuing some of these guys if they're thinking long-term, like, well, we want to make sure we're paving the way for our recruits coming in rather than get this guy now? And should they be thinking that way? Because on some level, like, they kind of got to just think about, like, we got to do what's best for us to win right now. I mean, Ryan Day, every year he loses to Michigan, his seat gets a little bit hotter. So I understand he's clearly, I don't think, getting fired going into next year. But do you think it's okay for them to think that way? Or should they maybe pursue some of these guys, whether or not it's going to impact what happens with, say, an Aaron Nolan?
I think if there was a guy that they thought could step in and be what Justin Fields was for you, which is an immediate impact guy, and obviously Justin had to sit the year out because of the old college football rules, but I feel like if they had their Justin Fields, I think they'd pull the trigger. And I think in lieu of that, I think they are doing the smart thing. Like, the goal is to have a sustainable ecosystem of quarterbacks where it becomes next man up, where you can go from JT Barrett and say, all right, now it's either Joe Burrow or Dwayne Haskins, right? Or Dwayne Haskins. And then you can go, all right, it's either player X or Justin Fields. And then it's either CJ Stroud or this player. So I think that should be the goal. And it just so happens that in between CJ Stroud and Aaron Nolan, you have a 2-year gap. So I think it would make sense, unless you have a guy that you think is worth losing Aaron Nolan, I think it makes sense to try and, look at short-term options to try and maintain this ecosystem of next man up at the quarterback position, because I think that's only going to help you. Like I think it's more value to you developing a guy that is sat on your roster for a year or 2 or 3 years and him going into the NFL draft than you were like the guy that was the conduit for that guy in his final year of college. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think that's probably a fair way to look at it. And just kind of keeping the ecosystem going, and that's part of the reason why the Buckeyes are in the dilemma they're in right now, right? Because their succession plan to C.J. Stroud was supposed to be Quinn Ewers, and Quinn Ewers transfers, goes to Texas, and now that's why you have this kind of gap/window that's throwing things off for you, where you had to start Kyle McCord this year, and you're kind of out there surveying what's available to you at the quarterback position. But I also just think too, like, I understand that thought process, and I understand you got to kind of think ahead of, okay, where are we going to be in a year and 2 years, whatever. And I'm not some recruiting master, but I also think about it from the perspective of this organization top down with Ryan Day. They don't have time to sit necessarily and like wait and see, like, okay, well, we'll find a way to get to Aaron Nolan, and then we'll run with Aaron Nolan. Like, no, like, you got to win this year. So I agree with you. Like, I'm not saying make any rash decisions and just bring in Cam Ward because you think he's going to, like, quiet the masses out there with the torch and pitchforks. It has to be a fit. And it sounds like maybe they thought Riley Leonard was a fit and they pursued him a little bit. But, like, yes, it has to be a fit for sure. But I just don't know that they have like the time, I guess is the word, to sit there and just be like, well, it's okay. We'll let Dante Moore go elsewhere. We'll let Malachi Nelson go elsewhere because we got Aaron Nolan next year, and we'll just figure it out this year. And I don't know, maybe they feel really good about Devin Brown. Some of the stuff that I've heard is just that, yeah, they seem like they're going to sort of roll with what they have in the room already. And if that's what they're going to do, then I guess we're going to see how that works out. And you mentioned, the locker room has really come to Devin Brown's defense and said, we believe in him, and he's got a little bit more mobility to him than McCord did. So listen, maybe that's the plan and maybe it'll work out. But I just don't know that, especially with the new AD coming in, that you just want to sit back and kind of be like, well, we're okay because we got Aaron Nolan next year. Like, you do need an option this year, whether that's a young guy that might push a couple recruits away, or whether or not because that's what you bring up Justin Fields. Like, even Justin Fields started 2 years. So that could have disrupted some of the recruiting process for Ohio State, but it didn't. Like, he came, he played 2 years, and then that bridged the gap to C.J. Stroud. I'm not worried about Ohio State finding the next big quarterback recruit. Like, they're always going to be on the radar for guys, and they're always going to be bringing these guys in. So even if it were to cost you, I guess, Aaron Nolan, okay, well, you'll get the next guy that comes out.
There's something to be said about not panicking in the wake of the Michigan loss. So while I would love that quarterback in the portal, and I certainly have been hot and heavy off every name, KJ Jefferson, Cam Ward, it's the Baskin and Phelps. Do we want them? But if Ryan Day is looking at this and says, there's some things I need to change, but I can't panic at the quarterback position. I need to trust what I've done for the last 5 years here. There's actually some really smart logic to that. Right? It's good to change. It really is. If he thinks about why he hasn't beaten Michigan, I think, and finds ways to change or adapt off that, that's good. But he shouldn't just go get a quarterback because, well, Kyle McCord lost, and then Kyle McCord didn't feel loved, and now we got to go ahead and change the whole plan and maybe endanger this 3-year plan we had at quarterback. So that would be the devil's advocate to what I think you just said.
I get it, and I'm not saying they need to panic either. But I'm just saying, like, the thought process going back the other direction to respond to what you just said would be, well, okay, you got to trust the process of the last 5 years. Well, the last 5 years, you've lost to Michigan 3 straight. You didn't play them the 1 year. You lost to them the last 3 years. So what is the process that you're trusting actually gotten you? So maybe you do need to change things up. That would be, I guess, like
what it's gotten you is like 47 wins or something like that. People act as if this is Michigan, before Jim Harbaugh or when Rich Rod was there. Like, guys, it sucked. I'm not I'm not here to I'm not here to polish that turd. It has sucked losing to Michigan in 3 straight years. It sucks not being in the playoffs this year. But look at where it's gotten you. Yes, these 47 wins, damn it. And I understand there's some valid arguments.
And this isn't even me.
The Big Ten.
This isn't even me necessarily, but I'm saying there's a lot of Ohio State fans out there who are sitting there saying we could bring in a lot of coaches who could do what Ryan Day has done, which is win all these games in the Big Ten, and then lose to Michigan.
Yeah, and that's fan hubris. And respect. And listen, Buckeye fans, I love you. I do. You're crazy, and I love being a Buckeye fan because it's conversation.
I'm standing up for the common fan. Let's go.
Yeah. By the way, there's Common Man in Columbus. Now it's Common Fan here in Cleveland. I just at some point, I get it. Yes, almost anybody can beat Illinois. Almost anybody can beat Purdue. But to throw this away, well, anyone could do this. No, not anyone could. Okay? There's a reason why James Franklin has been third tier in the Big Ten. There's a reason why it took Jim Harbaugh 4 or 5 years to break through that impenetrable seal that Ohio State had for it. And yes, it's happened. And yes, there's reasons to look at this thing and say, how do we make it better? But this woe is me, the sky is falling, we're never going to win again. That is just fan overreaction. And it is not something Ryan Day should consider himself with. He's got to focus on how to tweak the program, not overhaul it completely, not wholesale changes, not throw literally everything out the window. It is tweak the program. Because if you tweak too much, you might go the opposite way, which is going to get you fired. Losing 4 games, including to Michigan next year, is going to get you fired just as much as if you only lose to Michigan next year. Oh, it felt good. It's been building up for a minute here. Now we have not gotten to the high school recruiting side of things as the early signing period opens up tomorrow and runs through Friday of this week. So we're going to get to that when we come back. But first, a word from our sponsors.